Hi ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Let's Talk, or Share Your Grin, essentially book review. Honestly, this is going to be a book breakdown for an amazing, wonderful book. This is the second part of this kind of book breakdown, rundown / review. Review is that I love it to pieces, and I kind of just wanted to make a video series where I kind of go through the jot points really quickly, and also whilst the book is somewhat fresh in my mind, my takeaways and my understandings of things, so that way I don't forget them in the future. When inevitably it starts to degrade, I can either read the whole book again, which will take a bit of time, or maybe watch a 40-minute video that can kind of run through it all. So that's my idea with this, and hopefully if you're in the same boat, maybe I've seen some things in the book that you didn't, and if you happen to see some things in the book as well that I may have missed, then please tell me in the comments. Again, it's all about trying to retain this, and I think it is also interesting seeing what other people get from the pillars or the principles, so to speak. But my friends, today, of course, I should have mentioned it, the book that we're going to be talking about is how to win friends and influence people. I always mess that up. It's not how to make friends, it's how to win friends and influence people. And again, we talked about the kind of brevity of how the sentiment of how to like influence people isn't really influence as much as it is just to like, if you're a kind person, hopefully, and you do these things, you'll get this outcome because you are doing those things, i.e. kindness or genuinely listening to other people. They're more likely to genuinely listen to you. But I digress. In the last part, we covered basically how to make friends, how to get people to enjoy being around you, hopefully, if you follow the principles, and how some deep-seated things within human nature that people desire to be fulfilled. And to be a pillar in somebody's life is to fill them, or to fulfill those pillars, or principles, or ideals, or hopes, aspirations, or needs. Needs is the best way I think you can describe it. But yes, again, if you guys haven't seen part 1, that is essentially what we cover. If you guys don't know anything about the book, by the way, it's one of the self-help books that made all self-help books. It's like the grandfather of self-help books, made by this man called Dane Carnegie, who is brilliant. The first part of the book is about how to make friends and how to make people like you, and not really make people like you, but how to be a person that people want to be around and gain something from being around. And the second part is how to win someone over to your way of thinking or to your side. Then the last set of principles are how to be a really, really good leader, how to be like a pillar in somebody's life, how to convince someone, how to make someone rise to the occasion and become better. In this part, we're going to be covering how to win people over to your side, which has 12 principles. The last part was 6, and it was 40 minutes. So I'm going to be doing my best to keep on track, keep going, and hopefully you'll put up with me. Thank you again, and let's begin. Also, I understand the craziness of, I have a a night helmet right there, and I'm talking about, like, how to talk to people. Anyway, you must be in a desperate spot. I would highly advise reading the book. But anyways, let's go through the principles to how to win someone over to your way of thinking or to your side. Principle 1. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Now, this one is, when I first heard it, I remember feeling like a little abrasive, like, well, wait, like it's good to argue, it's good to like understand why you believe what you believe, and like to push to some extent against somebody else's beliefs so that they know what they want. But again, the thing with this book and the thing with this man is it seems like, and this is my own anecdotal thought, but it seems like he's way more interested in, okay, what is the outcome that we're trying to get after? If the outcome is to understand someone and to convince them of your understandings, then the last thing you want to do is be any way aggressive, any way judgmental, any way like forceful with your ideas. And maybe, just maybe, they're right and you're wrong. So to kind of go at it with like, I'm right and I'm going to prove them wrong is just the wrong mentality to have in general. And again, if the end goal is to convince someone over to your side, you shouldn't be so hardy in your approbation to want or need to prove them wrong. It should be about how to convince them the best to your ability. The goal is to get them over to your side, and the best way to do that is to be as convincing as you can. Again, strive to be convincing and to win them over to your side rather than to just win the argument. You know what I mean? That's a whole other kind of thing that you're going to get, and the outcome is not going to be getting the person over to your side because of data, analytics, all these studies that were shown that we'll go through. But anyways, so yeah, when people are wrong, they will always try to save face. So always avoid the acute angle. Avoid arguments. So even if somebody, like, very rarely will you meet a person who's just like, I'm totally open to being absolutely wrong, convince me, and etc. And if they say that, a lot of times they're lying, and they're just saying it to, like, yeah, gas you up in a weird way. But that's all the more reason to never attack someone head on like that, to avoid the sharp angle in an argument that would essentially allow them to close up or stuff like that. And of course, this is my favorite line from this thing. To me, it encapsulates exactly what this guy is trying to say. You can't win an argument. If you lose an argument, you lose it. If you win, you still lose. Because if you win an argument, all you've gained is an empty victory, one where you don't gain any goodwill. And that's a part of the crux which we're going to get into. One of the kind of things that you're going to try to do when trying to convince someone of anything is to try to build goodwill. They have to want to believe that you're not trying to hurt them or mislead them or harm them in any way. And how you do that is by making them understand that all you want is the best for them, and to try to be as serene as humanly possible and not to be aggressive. Because if you do, then people can, of course, feel attacked, close up, and not see you as a person that's trying to help them, and therefore you're a danger, I don't want to listen to you, etc. In fact, there's a thing that we're going to spoil here, but it's all of the facts and logic does not help anybody if they believe you have ill will towards you or towards them from you, you know. Again, for those guys who do not know, I just wrote down a bunch of quotes every single time I read a chapter, things that how I would remember things. So again, ADHD, dyslexia nonsense helps me learn in this way. So if this may not be exactly what he said, but it's the way that helped me cement it in my brain, and also how I kind of seen things. Perfect. Anyways, sometimes they're just literally quotes. Hatred never is ended by hatred, but by love. Cheesy, but pretty damn true. And misunderstanding is never ended by argument, but by tact, diplomacy, conciliation, and a sympathetic desire to see another person's point of view. So now that we kind of have an idea of, okay, the last thing that we want is to try to get into a heated argument. Again, one of the things he says is embrace disagreements, but stay away from arguments. You can disagree with someone and try to hash it out, but stay in the realm of disagreements. And we'll get into how you can avoid that, because some people are hell-bent on creating arguments. We'll get into that. Anyways, so here's how you keep a disagreement from turning into an argument. Number 1, welcome the disagreement. This is kind of a weird quote that I've never heard about, but he said, when two parties never disagree, one of them is unnecessary. So you should at some point be around with friends that challenge you, partners that challenge you, or you challenge them. But that doesn't mean an argument. Again, if someone is exactly the same as you, then you're not gaining anything from each other. You're not growing as people, because yeah, you're apparently both perfect, you know, like, yeah. And be thankful that someone brought that to your attention, welcoming the disagreement. Okay, so this is number 2, and I think this is super, super huge when it comes to avoiding an argument or maintaining a disagreement. Distrust your first initial impression. So if someone says something to you and you take offense, stop. Distrust that. I'm sure they didn't mean it in that way. Stop. Don't let yourself feed into they're trying to get me, what a bunch of mean, rude, again, distrust your first initial impression of whatever they say when it comes to challenging your way of thinking. Don't be defensive, keep calm, and watch out for your first reaction. Control your temper. Again, we'll talk about this later on, but there's a great power in understanding your emotions and being able to quiet the storm and, again, seek a greater outcome rather than, a mess. Third tip is listen first. Give your opponent a chance to talk and let them finish. Do not resist, defend, or debate. Build less barriers and more bridges of understanding to your points. This is something we'll also get into, but let the person who you're having a disagreement with talk themselves out. If they don't feel like they have said what they need to say, they will immediately stop you from being able to say what you have to say. So yeah, again, just let people, also the more a person talks, the more you understand and can pinpoint the things that are the problem. Even though emotions can start controlling things, you can at least address the actual things. And the more information you have, the better you're off in convincing someone to come to your side. Whether that's knowing their morality, knowing their own principles, knowing their likes and dislikes, knowing the true root cause of the problem and not all the wish-wash around it. Let them talk first. A lot. Fourth tip is look for areas of agreement. Also, look for areas where you yourself can admit error. is something he talks about in the book. But again, admitting your own fault, admitting that like, okay, you're right, I misstepped there, that's my bad. That shows the person that, okay, wait, I'm not trying to he's not trying to get me. He's admitting that in fact he messed up. Okay, so now I can admit I messed up on occasion. Yes, there are people who are hell-bent on just trying to dominate you and break you into submission. We'll get into that as well. But genuinely speaking, it helps to poke a hole in your own argument or poke a hole in your own temper, saying that, okay, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have come into this with as much aggression as I did. I apologize. And then they feel like, okay, he's not here to force me into submission. He's here just to talk. All right, let's talk. And then it puts things into a much greater lens. Also, again, the goal is to try to convince someone to come to your side. So to try to get as many things as you agree with, aimed toward pushing them in the direction of your side. There's another thing in here which we'll get to, but it's essentially to the effect of, you can't convince anybody of anything. You can only give them the tools to convince themselves of that thing. Again, all the thoughts and logic will not get you to your side. It's kind of like the thing of how can so many people believe so many crazy things? Well, because people apply not facts and logic, but instead these other emotional motivators or other morality motivators or principles that they live by, those kinds of things. So it's not just facts and logic. Yes, that can be important, but for most people, unfortunately, it is not the way they kind of angle themselves. Emotions rule 90% of humans, I think. Anyways, and that 10% are usually sociopaths. Anyways, okay, tip 5 for, again, avoiding arguments: apologize. Sorry, sometimes I gotta notice and I'm like, God, that's bad. Apologize for one's mistakes. It will disarm your opponents and lower their defenses. This is a really battle strategy way of putting it, but yeah, always apologize for your own mistakes. So if you say something that was incorrect, if somebody fact checks you, say, yeah, you're right, I'm sorry, I didn't actually know that, and hopefully they'll be more enticed to do the very same for you. And at the very end of the day, you can use the fact that you've admitted error as a kind of way of showing that, hey, I only want the best for you, or you've yet to do that, and I've shown you that you've been incorrect. And then they'll be like, okay, well, maybe by you pointing that out, yeah, maybe I could actually admit because you did too, and you could use that as leverage as well. Okay, so tip 6 is promise to think about your opponent's ideas and considerations. So again, genuinely say, okay, now that we've hashed it out, now that we understand our disagreements, we understand what the other person thinks, I'm going to genuinely think about that. Give me a couple days or a couple hours, and I'll think about it. And again, the goal that you're trying to aim towards is not, when people end an argument, it's all about the next time I see you, I'm gonna win your argument. I can't tell you how many times I've been with around women who were like, I thought I did the argument, and then 3 hours later I'm getting shit on. They've been thinking about it for fucking 20 minutes. I'm sure there's men and all ages can have this kind of personality trait, but I digress. Again, that's why. But with a disagreement, you both walk away being like, you know what, maybe that's right. And some of you guys might be thinking, I've never walked away from an argument or never walked away from a discussion like that. Well, it's probably because you haven't had a discussion, you probably had an argument. When someone, the amount of times when you've discussed something with your friends, and it was in a really nice environment, and the person wasn't trying to fuck you up or anything like that, or try to tell you that you're wrong. Instead, you're just talking. How many times have you walked away and being like, yeah, me and my friend, we went deep and we figured this out together? But in reality, maybe your friend knew the whole time what he thought and was just trying to convince you of his position and in way winning you over to his side. So that's the goal. Again, when you're trying to avoid an argument, which an argument a lot of times can breed resentment, and then a person can try to win the battle rather than be convinced of new information. If that makes any sense. Anyways, the last the tip for avoiding arguments is anyone who takes the time to disagree with you is interested in the same thing as you. Think of them as people who really want to help you. Again, this was something that crucially helped. In fact, I highlighted it. This is something that really helped me with this idea, because I'm a person who really likes arguments. I like dialogue, combat. I like it a lot. But I noticed that I was very poor at convincing other people of anything. But for me, this was a wonderful thing. The idea of, okay, wait. Person's not trying to tell you that you're wrong or convince you of their own thing. They're just trying to help you. And this can give you a nice serenity to conversation and discussion. Okay, so for the last thing I got for you for principle 1, which is to avoid arguments and to embrace disagreements, when a person yells, the other person should listen. Otherwise, it just becomes a noisy fight or a noisy argument. Now, this is one of those things where sometimes you're with a person who is hot-tempered, very runs really hot, or maybe they're just bottling up a lot of shit for a long time and you've yet to see it, or they're good at hiding it and you haven't been able to pull it up from the surface. So then there's just a lot of emotions buried deep, and then you say something and then bang. And a lot of times it's not even you who they're mad at or who they're disagreeing with, but it's all of the people that came before them, and you just happen to carry the same torch, and well, they're hell-bent on putting it out. So at this point, again, try to lock down your emotions. Understand that if they're yelling, just try to listen. And there's nothing that is more dismantling to someone who starts raising their voice than someone who is just completely and utterly calm whilst they're freaking out. And there's no better way to disarm a person that's like that as well. When you yell, another person yells louder and then louder and then louder. But the thing that's hard is a lot of times when somebody yells at you, it's kind of a way of forced submission in some cases. I've had brothers where a person doesn't care about your position, they're just trying to yell you down. They're trying to break you down with a weird kind of force. But again, the goal is not to crumble, but instead just to close the doors and wait and listen. Yes, there may be some insults, yes, there may be some things there, but again, try to realize, try not take offense, and again, don't let them try to dominate you or beat you with just being louder. Let them yell like a little childish lunatic while you stay perfectly calm. This is the best way to pull them over to your side, as well as to cool them down. Maybe they just need to vent, and unfortunately you're the person in the line of fire. I would suggest, again, putting up some barriers, because they might say some hurtful things. Let them cool off, and then come at them quietly, tactfully, and if anything, we're going to get into it, but they'll feel terrible for lashing out at you. And there's ways you can, there's ways you can, angle a conversation with, it wasn't a good feeling when, you blew up at me, but I tried to do my best to hear you out. Again, hopefully I don't have to go through that constantly, because it's not enjoyable. And then that hopefully person will be like, yeah, holy shit, I guess I probably wouldn't have been great, you getting yelled at and etc. But I digress. That's principle one. Principle one. Take a long time to get from principle one. Oh my goodness. Principle one, though, is also, I wrote a lot of stuff down to it because it's something that I personally feel I had to change about myself, because yeah, man, I loved arguments. I used to, and now I love disagreements because I'm actually able to connect with people and actually win them over to my way of thinking. And also, I don't know, I feel a lot more confident about talking to people as well, because I know that I'm not trying to change you. I'm 100% okay with whatever you believe, but at the same time, let's just talk. Let's discuss something. And I control how I react to that discussion. I don't let you set the pace or set the tone. That's on me. Anyways, principle 2. Show respect to the other person's opinion. Never say you're wrong. Boy. Ingrain those into your brain. Never say you're wrong. You get nothing for it besides your own selfish ego just sucking it all in. Always avoid that, because people, that changes it to basically being an argument. Even if you have a lovely discussion, but then you're like, I told you so, gotcha, I can't believe you used to think that way. A person will be like, I'm okay. Next time we discuss anything, it turns into an argument, or it turns into me losing. So I'm not gonna let even play this game with you. I'm not gonna discuss things with you, and that's terrible, because people will just close up. Also, you'll be a very good conversationalist because you're not open for discussing things. Just again, never say you're wrong to another person. You can find different ways to crack that egg. We'll get into that in a minute. But also, show respect to your other person's opinion. Okay, so this is huge. Men must be taught as if you have taught them not, and things unknown proposed as things forgot. This is a weird quote. I don't know who said it because I didn't write it down because I'm an asshole. Anyways, men must be taught as if they are taught not. Again, this is a big thing which is in this whole chapter, but it's really hard to convince anybody of anything. Really hard. And a lot of times, especially if you're dealing with people who are of a higher age, they've already calcified their experience in life, their beliefs, their thoughts on the world, and it's incredibly hard to convince them of anything. And that could be said for teenagers who are going through emotional angst and have so many emotions running through them that they're just going to bottle up and close up. This doesn't matter. The thing that matters is it's really hard to convince anybody of anything, but the best person to convince anybody of anything is, of course, that person. So you must teach them as if you have taught them not. So you must convince them to convince themselves of things. And I'll tell you guys an example in a minute. Yes, and instead of saying to a person, you don't know this, here's the information, now you're improved. People are like, why do I need to improve? Instead, say, well, here's something that you may not have thought about, or here's some things you may have forgotten about because I know we talked about this. So you're angling things as, this is something that you already have kind of known. I know you're like, you've already kind of inadvertently told me this. And then you re-echo it to them, almost as if to kind of like subliminally be like, hey, this is something that you have the potential to already believe. In fact, your everything that I've heard from you dictates that. But you don't say, here's something that you should now apply to yourself because reasons. That could work if you have an incredible amount of goodwill built up with that person, but more often than not, no. They're just gonna be like, who's this asshole telling me how to improve when he themselves have so many problems, or I don't need to improve, I'm doing just fine. You know, like there's all kinds of emotional judgment that can happen, which is why building goodwill is so important, so that person doesn't think you're trying to do that to them. I digress. Next thing. You cannot teach a man anything. You can only help him to find it within himself. Again, lovely quote, kind of gets right at the problem. You can only convince another person to find the truth, find the information within themselves, and this is my own anecdotal experience. But I used to constantly hear about like these health things, which are really good. I'm not going to bring them up because people may have thoughts about them, but I had these health things that I always tried to get my parents to do, which I thought that would be very helpful to them, knowing how many kind of issues that they face, and knowing that was these health things were supposed to help with them. Every time I suggested they would try this thing, this fruit, this medicine, this exercise, whatever, oftentimes they would be like, oh, cool. And they wouldn't do it. But the minute I changed my tact and said, okay, I think it'd be interesting if you looked up the benefits of this fruit, of this vegetable, of this exercise, or even if I angled in a different way and said, I'm thinking about trying this, I'm not sure if there's any red flags, if you have time could you look and see if there is any, and then they would Google it, and then they would see an article where a person goes off about all the benefits of this and what they can help them with, like diabetes and whatnot. These are not some sort of snake oil cures, I'm not that kind of guy, I'm just saying it's like these are things that could generally help a little bit. Anyways, they came back and did it immediately because it was like they convinced themselves of it, rather than me as an individual convincing them of that. So again, it's important to teach people as if to teach themselves, not to teach them as if you are this grand ordered teacher, because a lot of people, especially if they're your boss or they're your mother or they're your father or they're your uncle or whatever, they think in a weird way that you are like, oh yeah, you don't know as much as me, you know, and that's probably a problem that everyone on the planet should work on, but I digress. Do not be apprehensive in your words or belief, and we're going to get into that, but all of that's kind of boiling down to the core component of show respect for your other person's opinion, perception, understanding of the world, because they have their own lived experience, their own values, all that, and you can't change them unless you understand those aspects of them. So, and also it's not worth judging, because if you live the same life that they would, odds are you'd be exactly like them. But now let's get on to the why you should never say you're wrong. Well, from the base level, it locks people up. It makes people not want to engage in a disagreement because they know that there's a negative monster at the end of it, which they'll fight that monster to try to not get to that monster, you know? And this is perfect. This summarizes it perfectly. Few people like to listen to the things that reflect on their poor judgment. When we are wrong, we may admit it to ourselves, and if we are handled gently and tactfully, we may then admit it to others and be happier for it. So this is a story in the book that I remember. It was wonderful, but it was basically like the guy Dale Carnegie had a new apartment, hired some stylist to give him new, I think it was curtains, like high class curtains. He ended up getting overcharged for the curtains. They looked really nice, but there was a lot of money. One of his female friends came to the house, and she basically laughed at him about how much he spent on these curtains. Kind of like, how could you spend so much money on this silly little design? Like, it's crazy how much you spent. And immediately, Dale Carnegie, the guy who bought the curtains, was like, you wouldn't understand. Like, these curtains are incredibly high class and they're amazing, and he doesn't want to acknowledge his mistake, his wrongdoing, his unfortunate blunder. But then, several weeks after, he had another female friend maybe they weren't female friends. Regardless, another person come into his house and acknowledge the curtains. And except this time she was just over the moon, very complimentary, telling him how beautiful they looked. Oh my God, they look so nice. And then he acknowledged his poor judgment. And now that he knew that there was no like, you're wrong, you're stupid, he himself was kind of like, well, actually, the curtains were overpriced. That I shouldn't have paid that much for them. I don't have that much to pay for them at the time. Take away the idea that someone can like really fuck up, and like, you know, you're not gonna hold their feet over the fire. Then they'll acknowledge their own weakness around you, which is amazing. That's like a level of trust that they have with you, to know that they can confide in the fact that they were wrong, and the fact that they made a mistake on something, and knowing that you will just accept them regardless of a person who makes mistakes, and not a person that is infallible, or a person that needs your wisdom, because that belittles other people, and people don't want that, of course. But yes, that's kind of the thing I remember from his story, which is, again, very cool. So if the person's ever in the position where they're really wrong, try not to hold their feet over the fire. And on top of that, if you handle them with grace and tact, then they'll probably will tell you of their own shortcomings. Again, do not be apprehensive with your words or beliefs. People will lock up. Try not attacking others for their viewpoints. And again, avoid the acute angle. What he means by avoid the acute angle is never use words that position you as the opposition of the other person's position. Don't do that. Avoid the acute angle. So if you're disagreeing with someone, say, it appears to me that insert this, or it seems to me that this is the way that this should be. Not you're wrong, or that it's just stupid to think that way. You know, like, or like, I disagree. Even that's pretty like, boom, I'm in front of you, instead of like, well, I just, the reason why it doesn't make sense to me is because when I think about this, it ends up being like this. And again, that doesn't mean, it's not saying like, I'm against you, you're wrong, I have a different position than you, you know? It's not like that. It's like, well, I don't really agree, or I'm not sure if that's the way it should be, you know? And that, of course, will allow a person to have a free-flowing discussion with you about a topic. But again, the reason why you don't tell people they're wrong is because they close up, and it kind of destroys any goodwill that you built with them. Again, you're trying to like position yourself as someone who just wants best for it. By the way, you're not like trying to do anything. You're supposed to be a person who doesn't like try to get people, who tries to like prove that they're wrong and like laugh in their face for it. You're trying to be a person who genuinely wants to persuade another human being to thinking the same way you do, or at least understanding why you think the way you do. And again, the end goal is to let the other person build their way to your perspective. That's the goal of trying to win someone over to your understanding, is again to enable them the complete understanding of why you perceive the things you perceive. And hopefully, if they have the same moral compass as you and etc., then they'll come to your side. This is huge. This, again, a lot of these aren't exactly tied to like the exact principle, but they're like underlying nuggets of absolute gold that I wish there was like its own principle to some extent, but this is one of the ones. I judge others by their own principles, not by my own. If you are trying to convince anybody of anything, you cannot convince them of something that you believe if they don't believe it. So for instance, if you really believe in like loyalty and like marriage, and we're going to use the example of you have this buddy that you've had forever since childhood, but he read some books that said, hey, I think monogamy is not my thing. I want to be able to date whoever I want to date, be with whoever I want to be. And if you're trying to convince him to come to your perception, you can't do it by holding the same value of like, well, hey, I think a human being should only be able to be with one person or whatever. Because he has a completely different value structure of that. He doesn't care about having children, about whatever the value structure of your position could be. He cares about his own moral value. Same thing as a person could be a person could value economic growth over the individual's health. And to try to convince them of your position, of whatever that may be for the individual's health, it's going to contradict their pattern. But if you understand where their principles lie, you can build their principles back to what you believe, back to what your position on a subject is. and that's kind of the notion of like a building bridges and less barriers. But you can't build any bridges if you don't know anything about the person, the individual, what they value, their personal what do you say, principles. Everyone has principles that they live by. Understand what others are and judge them by their principles, not by your own, because you can't force your will on of your principles on other people. It can make a good convincing discussion about why you believe what you believe, and maybe they can share some of the same as you. But yeah, again, the idea is you want to use their principles for you rather than against you. But yeah, that one I think should have its own thing. And then there's another quote, agree with thine adversary quickly. Again, the more you agree with someone who you're having a discussion with, the more they understand, okay, wait, he's not trying to get me. He's not trying to catch me in my bullshit or like hurt me or convince me that I'm wrong or that I've been living my life like the wrong way. We're just trying to aim and figure out this discussion. And again, this is a passive thing that I just think is important as well. It's not in the book. It kind of may be in the book, but whenever you're trying to convince anybody of anything or trying to correct negative behavior within somebody, never go after the person's self. Go after the problem you have with their actions. Yes, don't ever go after the individual or the person's like looks or appearances or whatever, or like you're a bad person. Never do that. Say, I don't like the behavior that you do because it sucks, or because, well, not sucks. I lost it. But go after, I don't like your behavior because when you do this, it makes me feel this way. And I think that's a valid feeling to feel from that. I think you would feel the same way if I did that to you. And then you both are now angled side to side rather than against each other. You're both looking at a thing that you're both trying to solve, and the person doesn't feel like attacked, self like inflicted attacked. So again, whenever you're trying to convince anyone, and if anything, always go for the problem itself or the discussion that you disagree with, not the person. Always avoid the acute angle and going for someone's identity of self, or like, again, you're a bad person for being this way, is wrong. I think this thing that you do is bad. I think this action hurts people. And they're like, okay, you might be right. Or, oh, well, I don't think it hurts people. And then you maybe have a discussion of why it could potentially hurt someone. And then maybe they're like, okay, well, okay, maybe it hurts some people, but maybe it's worth the hurting or whatever. And maybe that thought throughout the years or throughout the weeks, he's like, okay, maybe I don't want to hurt anybody, even if it hurts people a little bit. And then you may win someone over in that way. I digress. I'm going off on tangents when we're only at principle 2. We're like 40 minutes in. Oh my god. For what it's worth, these principles had a lot. Like, sometimes Dale Carnegie kind of goes off on like one principle having like 50 different sub-principles within it, which I think are incredibly valuable. And that's yeah. But yeah, now they're starting to tighten up a little bit. Principle 3. If you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. This whole part is kind of interesting. Or not, well, all of it's interesting, but this one has some specifics that I want to get into. If you're wrong, admit it. Simply put, remember, self-criticism takes the fun away from someone who is criticizing you, /condemning you, /complaining about you. Remember to have fun with self-criticism. You're not trying to like self-emulate, which is like burn yourself alive. You're trying to make it so that the person feels like there is no fun in tearing you down, because you're doing a damn well good job about it, but also not quite that. Let's get into that in a minute, but let's keep reading. When you are truly wrong, don't seek an alibi. Don't try to escape. Don't try to rebut. Take it head on and seek how to make things right and to seek forgiveness. So again, principle 3, if you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. So this whole principle, if you read the chapter, it's essentially him going into the idea of, okay, when someone, okay, take a teen kid. We're gonna give an example to kind of echo this whole point. Take a teenager who messed up, maybe crashed the car into a fire hydrant, and then his dad runs out of the house and starts yelling at him. If the kid is just like, well, I don't know, a dog swerved out and it made me hit the fire extinguisher. It's not my fault or whatever. The dad, to some extent, will kind of be like, well, I don't like. The car's broken. This is like what? Like, you're taking no responsibility for this? Or it's what the hell? Like, it's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating, I would imagine. Now, let's say the kid says, "Yeah, I messed up. I'm wrong. A dog swerved out, and I reacted badly. That's pretty good. But now, let's say the kid's freaking out. He says, I'm so sorry, Dad, a dog came out. I understand if you don't want to let me like drive the car anymore. I'll pay for it. I like, you know, like a person who just relentlessly takes responsibility and also, like, to some degree, really takes the fun out of the person who's angry at them or like or frustrated with their actions. The goal with this principle, which is if you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically, is to, first of all, genuinely take responsibility, and when you are wrong, you are wrong. Admit it and try to seek how to not have it happen again. Try to seek forgiveness to the people that you may have hurt by a consequence of your actions taken, and don't try to like push the blame off of you or do anything like that. Take it head on, and then also the goal to some extent is also to make sure that people know that you truly are sorry, that you made mistakes, and that you will try to do your best to improve for it, and to some extent to acknowledge one's mistakes so much that the other person wants to defend you. The example he gives in the book is an employee of this employer, and this employee used to constantly get in trouble for like doing little mess ups, and his boss was like really temperamental and really like give it to him if he made the simplest mistake. But then he took Dale Carnegie's kind of things, and he talked to Dale Carnegie, and he said he found an amazing improvement with this specific principle, which is he started to like basically self-criticize, truly take responsibility for his slight blunder and blow it out of proportion, so much so that when he made the mistake, his employer would come up, and before the employer even had a chance to say anything, he would say, I made a mistake, sir, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it this way, this is why I think it happened in this way, I can't believe that happened, I'll work harder to not have it happen again, and also if you need to let me go or take some days off for me, then you can do that. I wouldn't. That'd be the least of what I deserve. And the employer was like, "Whoa, whoa, let's chill out. It's just a simple mistake. Like, don't worry about it. It's not that bad. Like it's like, whoa." Whereas beforehand, the employer would have been like, "Well, I can't believe you're doing this. This is the 7th mistake you've made this week. You know, like." But because he already kind of acknowledged his own faults, the employer had to kind of take the other opposition, which is, hey, you're pretty good, you're a good employee, all right, like don't get depressed on me now, I need you. And one of the things that's subliminal in this, if you read between the lines of the stories, it does seem like you can position things in a very smart way. A byproduct by taking full ownership and kind of condemning one's silly actions or wrongdoings, one can also leverage their benefit. So in this instance, the employee in the example said, I would totally understand if you wanted to fire me, if you wanted to take me off the job for a couple days, I totally would get it. And then in the background of the employer's head, he's like, wait, I don't want you to like leave, I would have to get a new employee. In retrospect, you're a good enough employee to like not for me not to want to find another one. So like let's chill out. Like your fault is not that bad. I don't want to lose an employee. So weirdly, the person was leveraging his benefit to his employer as well, which I thought was a very subliminal thing as well, which you can self-emulate, but also be like, hey, if you think I don't do anything, then I'll walk away, and that might be enough for you to be like, okay, well actually you do something enough to warrant you being here. But yes, that is principle 3. If you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. I don't know what to say. It's fucking 15 minutes. But I don't know, man. This is a video for me, like, and I would appreciate me not like bursting through everything. Okay, principle 4. Begin in a friendly way. To me, this principle is all about the foundation of friendliness begets friendliness. Evilness begets evilness. And people will match oftentimes or mirror what you give to them. Now, yes, some people are just kind of in a bad mood in general, but oftentimes if they reflect upon the discussion and you are cool as a cucumber, relaxed and being genuinely kind, or at least peaceful at the least, they'll look back at themselves and be like, okay, well, yeah, I was kind of a grumpy asshole. But if you were angry, or if they were angry and then you became angry, then they're like, yeah, he was an asshole, we were both upset, I did nothing wrong. But if you were calm and he was not, then she was not, then hopefully the person would be like, hey, they were calm and I was kind of losing it. I apologize. You didn't deserve that, you know. Here's a lovely excerpt from the book. If you come at me with your fists doubled up, then I can promise you that mine will come up just as fast. Again, this is one of those things where it's, if someone is even getting frustrated, all the more reason for you to remain calm. Again, because then they just notice that they're the ones frustrated, and rarely does that happen. Rarely when someone's super calm and like just trying to be considerate, and then someone just popping off and losing it. Yeah, phrases like, I'm proud to be here, we meet here not as enemies but as friends, and that kind of thing of being like, hey, I've heard so many wonderful things about you. But like you've seen that, I see that a ton of times in podcasts where people somewhat disagree. They've started to try to like, hey, begin in a friendly way. Try to understand that the person's like, hey, I'm not a bad person. I don't think you're a bad person. I just want to understand, and I think we disagree on these two things, and I want to understand why we do that. If a man's heart is ranked with discord and ill feelings towards you, you can't win him to your thinking with all the logic in the world. Again, if somebody is angry at you, frustrated with you, believes that you are bad or wrong, then no matter with all the logic and facts and etc. in the world, you cannot change them because they think you are against them. They think that you want negative for them. At the base level, we're all like lizard brain, monkey brain having shit, which is survival. If you're against me, I don't care if you know more from me, I'm not going to change because you're against me. It contradicts me surviving. I'll play stupid and just, you know, have a better odds of surviving if that is the way it works. People don't want to change their minds, but they may possibly be led to if we do it in a gently and friendly way. And this is an amazing excerpt from the book as well, or amazing kind of like thing, but a drop of honey catches more flies than a bucket of gall. Essentially, again, you'll get more out of people with honey, with lavish importance, lavish praise than you will ever with abuse and anger and frustration. Again, the difference is you'll build resentment with the negative one and you'll build goodwill with the other. Yeah, again, a drop of honey, starting in a friendly way, starting with seeing the best in another person, gets you so much farther than having all of the facts and logic that you could possibly have. Not to say the facts and logic are important, but just to say that, again, a person needs to want to believe you, not to feel like you are against them, even if you have all the right information at hand. If you're a bad delivery system, then you're a bad delivery system. People won't accept what you have to offer. Find a way into someone's heart, and there lies their reason, sense, and understanding. There's a side thing. Remember to reward people for doing actions that you want to see more of. Yeah, and these are phrases that he likes to like throw out there, just kind of get your mind around like friendliness begetting friendliness. It would be for you to consider. This is an old book. This may be worth thinking of. Here are some facts that you may find interesting. You, with your wonderful knowledge of human nature, will surely understand that, again, this is another one, remember to bubble with goodwill and enthusiasm. This is kind of one of the previous things, but talk with a smile, bubble with enthusiasm, try to build goodwill, try to, again, people reflect what you give back at them a lot of times. So try to reflect the best aspects of your character. To convince others is to get them to your side. You fill them with importance, lavish praise, kindness, and appreciation. That is how you get someone to want to do anything for you. This is another one of those things. Gentleness and friendliness are always stronger than fury and force. The sun can make you take off your coat more quickly than the wind. The kindest and friendliest approach can make people change their minds more readily than all the bluster and storming in the world. Principle 4, again, begin in a friendly way. Principle 5, baby, get the other person to say yes, yes, yes immediately. And this is something from kind of like a psychological thing. This is Socrates' secret. Whenever you start a disagreement with somebody, never start with the things you disagree with, start with the things you agree with. Again, people are more likely, again, the whole idea of the discussion or a disagreement is nudging a person in the direction of your same understanding, down the bridge, so to speak, that you're building towards their ideals and understandings to yours. Yes, and keep emphasizing that you're both striving towards the same end of an understanding or a position that is the strongest, or a happier life, or a better outcome to talking to people, etc. Keep your opponents from saying no. Get them to say yes, yes instead. Again, generate force in the right direction. And again, the more people are saying yes, the more likelihood they are to say yes again to another thing. Basically, if you say no, psychologically, you start bottling up. You bottle up, you bottle up, you bottle up. The more you say yes, okay, I agree, yes, I can see that, maybe, yeah, you start to open up. You start to do the opposite of say no. When you say no, you physically and mentally start to block up. When you say yes, you start saying, okay, wait, no, we agree on a lot of things. Where do we we don't, yeah. You're like, we're not both on the same page. If you can get someone saying yes, 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 even to simple things, simple truths, then the likelihood of them saying and agreeing with the next thing or the fourth thing that they've said yes to is increased. Because again, they're opening up, they're opening up, they're opening up, and then you deliver your point, or your main points. Principle 6, let the other person do a great deal of the talking. Let the other person talk themselves out. They know more about their business and their problems than you do. So ask them questions. Let them tell you a few things. If you disagree with them, you might be tempted to interrupt, but don't. It's dangerous. They won't pay attention to you when they still have a lot of ideas on their mind. Yes, so again, this is one of the things why you let a person, like, you listen first, or you should try to let the person constantly talk, is because if a person has things unsaid or unresolved, then they won't listen at all to you. This is something that's kind of weird about human dialogue, but a lot of human beings operate under the perception of, I'm not going to listen, I'm just going to find a way how to respond to your argument, to your debate, rather than listening. So if you let them talk themselves out, you let them like get everything off their chest, finally they have nothing left to say and they're like, okay, now I'm open, and then you talk. But if you like, wait, I want to reply to that, and then you jump ahead of them and not let them finish whatever they were going to say, then they won't be listening at all to what you're saying, because they still have all this shit that they need to get out, and they're not focusing on what you're saying. They're focusing on like eventually being able to respond and get all this stuff out of their mind. And again, I think it's important to like constantly confirm that you're paying attention and understanding them. Otherwise they may just keep rattling off. Like, truly take a point to stop, break down what they're saying, understand it, and then say, okay, continue, I understand that, okay, this, okay, good, stop, continue, go ahead, sorry. And then like you do that. But some people just will endlessly ramble, so you do need to like try to show that you're genuinely trying to like break down these things and understand them. Yes, bottom line, encourage them to express their ideas fully. Again, you're trying to build a bridge to this person to win them over, so try to make an effort to examine them, to understand what they like, what they are proud of, what they're passionate about, and what they're interested in about, what kind of problems they have. Ask them about them. Be genuinely interested. Again, the more you have an understanding of someone, the more you understand their value structure, what matters to them, and basically more bridges that you could build towards you winning them over to your point. Even our friends would much rather talk about their achievements rather than listen to us about our own. But if you listen to your friends' achievements, then they are much more interested in asking you about yours. Again, friendliness kind of begetting friendliness. The same quote kind of gets at the same thing. If you want enemies, outshine your friends. But if you want friends, let your friends outshine you. And this is an interesting one, because they have a story about basically just this, where a person was constantly talking about his own like amazing things going on in his life, which is kind of funny, because if you look at like Instagram or Twitter, it's just the best parts of everybody's lives. And when you talk to someone about what they got going on, they light up. And it's funny because social media kind of facilitates that. But like, oh, here's the best part happening, here's the most impressive part about my week, and then everyone kind of talks about it. Social media kind of feeds into that realm. I digress. But if you're in person with a friend or in person with a stranger, always let them talk about their achievements, their wonderful things happening with them, and hopefully when they're done, when they're finished talking about their own achievements, they'll be like, oh, right, you, how have you been going on? And then hopefully they're as courteous. Or not even hopefully, people are. There's not one thing that I've applied in this book that hasn't been like still relevant to how human beings are, because it's a human level of experience thing. But anyways, principle 6, let other people do a great deal of the talking. That is absolutely huge. Principle 7, let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. We kind of already talked about this in the previous part. I think Dale Carnegie kind of like sets up little tiny tendrils in previous chapters to kind of, again, to be like, okay, Now we're going to get after this underlying kind of thing. Make suggestions and let other people think out your conclusions. So again, that's huge. Again, we're trying to let the other person convince themselves of things. So make suggestions and let the other person find their ways to the same conclusions as you had. Avoid telling others what to do. Instead, try to convince them that of their own accord, they wish to do that thing. People like to be consulted about their wants, desires, needs, and thoughts. Give people what they want, not what you think they want. This is huge. You can have your own values, your own perceptions of what you enjoy in life, but it means nothing to somebody. And if that somebody is someone you're trying to convince, or a friend, or whatever, and opposites attract, so the odds of this happening, that you're encountering these people, is very high. Judge them by their interests, by their wants, by what they desire in life, and help them seek those things and be valuable, and etc. And that will get you a person to just generally want to be around you, and etc. Let somebody else sell themselves your ideas. Again, let another person convince themselves of what you believe by giving them the nuggets that got you to that same place. No one is a better salesman than the person themselves, because they know themselves the best. Anyways, principle 8, try honestly to see something from the other person's point of view. Again, guys, a lot of this is just like good human being vibes. Remember that other people might be totally wrong, but they don't think so. Don't condemn them. Any fool can do that. Try to understand them. Only wise, tolerant, exceptional people ever try to do that. Again, if you want to be a wise, tolerant, good person, try to not condemn people, and try to genuinely see things from their perception and viewpoint, from their own morality, from their own principles, etc. Remember to put yourself in someone else's point of view. Understand someone's purpose and motivations before trying to convince them of anything. Again, oftentimes you can be wrong, and it's entirely okay to be wrong. Principle 9, be sympathetic with other people's ideas and desires. A magic phrase to stop arguments, eliminate ill will, create goodwill, and make other people listen. Listen, I don't blame you one iota for feeling how you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel the same way, or the same way you do. Again, this is like a great way to kind of extend the olive branch to say, I know I'm not coming after you. And this is kind of this whole principle, what is it again? Be sympathetic to the other person's ideas and desires. Again, the problem you have is not with the individual itself. The problem you have is with the individual's actions, ideas, or etc. Because you may think they're destructive, bad, or just unhealthy, or anything like that. So you're going after the ideas and etc., not the person itself. Person can change and grow. The ideas themselves might be just, well, you may disagree with them. Even like the craziest racist, bigot, rude, insufferable, cruel person could have very well been you under the right circumstances. If you had incredibly horrible parents, if you had a horrible thing happen to you, if you went through horrible trauma in the same way that they would, odds are you would end up exactly like them. So have empathy for other people's ideas and what they desire in life. Because in another life you could have very well had the same desires with their same with their same lived experience. I would talk for too long. My voice is starting to crumble because I'm just like, oh god, it's too much. If you ever question your emotions, be it anger, frustration, or a lack of understanding on another person's behalf, give it time. Like 2 days. Do what you feel is right after that time has passed. This is kind of a thing where a lot of people make a lot of choices in the moment, in the heat of an argument or even a disagreement, when it's far better to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I need more time to like really process and understand all the things going on in your head, all the things going on with you. I'll come back and we'll talk about this after it's kind of settled. But otherwise, you're just kind of going to be running rampant, and that's not great because you're making choices that you probably will regret because you don't have all the information. You haven't thought about it thoroughly enough. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's principle 9. Be sympathetic with others' ideas and desires. Not only that, but the more you understand about their ideas and desires, the more bridges you can build to their sense and reason and heart. Principle 10. You guys are like, Grin, you're Russia. I am. I'm freaking out. I've got to stream in like 20 minutes. Okay, I'm sorry. Principle 10. Well, again, the first two I spent way too much time on. Principle 10. Appeal to their nobler motives. I'm sure you guys have heard this one before. This one's great. Appeal to nobler motives. This is essentially, I could break it down really easily by just saying, at least to me, understanding generally wonderful things that most people would agree with, or understanding the individual, the friend, the father, the whatever, enough to where you know what would motivate them, what would be motives that would be noble or good, that would warrant them to act in a better way. Again, most people can agree with the age-old adage, which is to do unto others in which you would like to be done unto yourself. Apply noble motives to people and see what you can get. I've done this, and this is pretty goddamn effective. And it's also just a wonderful thing in general. This is kind of also a thing where like you can take the best behaviors that you have from someone and then like hold that up and constantly showcase that, and people will aim towards that more consistently. And in the book, he gives the example of a person who basically uses the terminology of, I think the last thing that you would want is to hurt somebody. Yeah, and some of the examples in the books were specific instances where like, what is it? Please do not post this picture of me. My mother doesn't like it. So this is referring to a person who he interviewed, Dale Carnegie, where a person was getting like swamped with people in the mail with a really unattractive like picture that was taken of him. So in order for him to get the newspaper to stop publishing it and stop using it, he didn't say like, I hate it, stop, it looks gross. He said, hey boys, my mother hates this picture of me, and every time she sees it, it makes her sad. And then there's a lot of men that worked in the newspaper, of course, back in the day especially, and of course all the men were like, yeah, we wouldn't want to make a sweet old mom upset, because everyone has a mama's boy at heart. So again, you apply to the nobler motives / motives, and hopefully the reason why it says nobler motives is because people want to aim for kindness, for being a good person, to be good in yours and society's hopefully eyes. Yeah, make people feel like they are honest, upright, and fair. Anyways, there's so much there. I hate the fact that I hate that we're kind of speeding past these last two because they're pretty wonderful. And there's a lot. Well, also, but they're a little bit like. You get it. Apply to the nobler motives. Principle 11. This is the one that out of all the principles in this one, this is the one that I feel like is a little, I get it, but it's a little weird. Principle 11. Dramatize your ideas. Essentially, this is like to capture someone's attention. So he gives the example of like someone saying, you're losing this. He goes into like a store and says, you're losing a crazy amount of money on these things. And I think he like drops a bunch of quarters on the ground, and all of these quarters kind of bash against the ground, and there's a bunch of quarters on the ground, and the boss of the I think grocery store is like, wow, that's a lot of money. But also like, that's a mess. But also I'm sure he's like, this is how much I'll save you. I'll pick it all up, but this is how much I'll save you. I think I could say like, oh, you're losing $50, which you could be like, whatever. But when I show you how much that is in cents, it dramatizes your idea, and it potentially could offer you a benefit if you're trying to get like a job or selling them something. Anyways. But yeah, there's a huge benefit to dramatizing your ideas. Again, examples of this is like on advertisements, on everything. You're able to convey what you believe if you're able to make it gaudy, bright, bigger, crazier examples. Like how many times have you heard in a debate or something, a person use an example and then just crank the like incredible excess of an argument, like Hitler did and it's like, we're talking about cheese and you're talking about Hitler here, like what? So you're dramatizing your ideas, but even still that can convince other people to kind of like sit upright, take acknowledgement, and focus, because it's exciting, it's big, it's lavish, it's in your face. Dramatize your ideas. Principle 10. Anyways, principle 12. Throw down a challenge. All men have fears, but the brave put down their fears and go forward. Sometimes to death, but always to victory. It's kind of a summary of this whole thing, but essentially, principle 12, throw down a challenge. So at the very least, if you want someone to change their actions, throw down a challenge. One of the things that I've seen that's worked wonders, if you have a friend that has a bad habit, if he's trying to stop calling his ex or whatever it may be, say that, okay, every single time you call your ex, you're going to have to pay me this amount of money. And I know one of her girlfriends that's what do you call it? Friends with your ex. What do you call it? She'll tell me. So you can't hide from this. Also, you're only going to be cheating yourself. But every single time you call your ex, you're going to have to pay me $50. You're throwing down a challenge. The person's like, yeah, absolutely, I won't do that. And because you've thrown down a challenge, the odds of you winning your person over to your side, which is the position of I don't want you to suffer and be constantly in this horrible relationship, this back and forth relationship. And now you're pushing them where they actually have to, it's like a challenge. It's like a game. You're like, okay, if I lose this, I lose points, and points is money. Yikes. So throw down a challenge. Same thing as like, I bet you can't do da-da-da, and that will thing. Or, okay, you have this position. I bet you change your mind if you see this documentary. Or I bet you change your mind if you see this article. If you don't believe me, then I'll completely concede. But tell me, read through the whole thing, and I'm going to quiz you on it. And if you've not read it, then it means nothing. You've lost. But if you do read it and you win, then I lose. You create a game. You create a challenge. And now the person is like, okay, if I'm going to get you. Or maybe you throw $10 on the line. And if $10 is all you got to do to get your friend to, like, I don't know, stop this horrifically terrible behavior that you know is sabotaging him in life, and bang, why not do that? It's $10. Jesus Christ, is he your friend or not? Again, now we're just going into the review portion of it. Principle 1. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Again, disagreements, embrace disagreements, avoid arguments. If somebody is yelling, listen. Genuinely try to not take offense when someone is disagreeing with you or like saying that you're wrong, etc. Hey, principle 2. Show respect to the other person's opinion. Never say you're wrong. Ever, ever, ever say you're wrong. It's awful. If people close up, if people never want to have a disagreement with you, ever. They feel like you're not trying to build them up, but instead you're trying to like tear them down and like poke holes in the person that they are, rather than just build them up and etc. Principle 3. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. The goal here is to try to make the other person want to defend you, as well as take complete ownership of your own blunder and then seek how to make things right. Again, if you've made a mistake, point it out. Point out how all the things you could have done better. Point out that you're going to try to do them better because you know all the things that you could have done better. Tell the person that you're genuinely sorry and that you will change, and then change. But also, again, layer it on thick so that the other person is quantifiably like, okay, well, you didn't like kill a person. You're acting as if you've like ended the world, and you haven't. Chill out. I still love you. I think you're great. And by seeing a person do that, the person is now flipped on the switch of, okay, wait, you're starting to like self-emulate. Let's put some water on you. Let's cool down. It's not that bad. And it'll lessen the initial effect, especially considering what most anger and resentment and shit comes from is a feeling of a person who doesn't take responsibility for their negative actions upon you. But where someone takes like 100% responsibility for how they've affected you, you're like, okay, yeah, I completely forgive you. As long as it doesn't happen again, as long as you improve, then we're good. Principle 4, begin in a friendly way. Again, people will reflect back at what you give them a lot of the time, more often than not. And if anything, the other person is just going to be getting mad and excessive, and you're going to be cool as a cucumber, calm as hell, listening, letting them go crazy. And then if they reflect back on that in the past, or if anybody is seeing this, they'll see that they're unhinged, and they'll probably talk to them, or they'll themselves will again tell them that they're being unreasonable. But again, start in a friendly way. Don't see the horribleness in them. Understand that you're trying to build your way to a better outcome of a future, and you're not trying to get them, so to speak. So begin in a friendly way. Principle 5. Get the other person saying yes, yes, yes immediately. Again, people are more likely to, whenever they say no, they bottle up, they close up. When they disagree, they bottle up, they close up. The idea is you're trying to get them to be on the same page. You're trying to get them to say yes, 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 so they're more open to saying yes, and yes. And also, this should be a back and forth. You should also be saying, yeah, I was wrong as well, and then they win, and then etc. Because that way they don't feel like it's this like battle, it's this game, it's this fucked up game where there's a winner and there's a loser. It's just about, I just want to be on the same page, I just want to be on the same understanding, because I think we have the same morality, or whatever it could be, for you building the same bridge towards that person. Principle 6, let the other person do a great deal of the talking. Again, if you do not let people finish or get out their thoughts, they won't be listening at all to you and what you're thinking. They'll be thinking about how they can throw out the rest of what they're saying. So let them completely deplete themselves out, and constantly be giving them leading questions to define and understand. Otherwise, a person will just continuously ramble. But let them speak and get it all out. Principle 7, let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. Again, the idea, you cannot convince anybody of anything. You can only convince another person to convince themselves. Nothing more needs to be said. Principle 8, try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. You very well might be wrong. Also, by understanding what their belief structure, their understandings, their information, you can build that way them to you or you to them. Again, you could be wrong, and I think if you admit that emphatically, then it could go really well for you. Principle 9, be sympathetic towards the other person's ideas and desires. Again, if you have a greater understanding of what they want, what their goals are, what their ideals are, then you can build those bridges to them. And again, these ones are just kind of tricks that I find to keep in your back pocket. But principle 10, appeal to the nobler motives. Again, I think you're a kind, wonderful person. I don't think you would want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I think in this instance, a person seemed like they were upset. You know, when that person's like, okay, well, I'm that kind of person. I don't want, like, you know, so it's like, principle 11, dramatize your ideas again and be very gaudy, be very loud. Not very loud, sorry, be very, like, expressive. And the whole point is to make sure people get a really good image of what you're saying to convince them to come to your other side. Principle 12, throw down a challenge. This one is like a last resort, but it's also incredibly effective. Again, the whole idea of like, okay, if you do this thing, then you lose. And when you lose, you have to give me something that is of value to you. It could be money, it could be whatever, it could be $10. The thing is, though, with that, you have to make it enough money to make it a game. If it's like a cents, then it doesn't matter. If it's $50, then yeah, the person's not going to want to lose the game. You know what I mean? Same thing as, I bet you will change your position if you read this article. Yeah, that's a little rough. You want to be a little more tact because you're positioning yourself as like I'm going to get you, and you don't want that. But again, if last resort, if you can't convince anyone of anything, then you're already kind of in this weird position, then you do that. But ladies and gentlemen, that was how to make friends, how to win friends, and influence people, section 2. Boy howdy, that was, how much? An hour and 30 minutes for me. I gotta cut out probably some stuff because some stuff was probably a little bit rambly, but I love the book to pieces. But yeah, each one of them is incredibly valuable. The next final part for how to make friends, how to win friends, and influence people will be coming out hopefully shortly. And we're going to be talking about the final set of amazing principles, which I heavily think, again, you guys should read this book if you're just wanting greater clarity. Again, the way this book sells it to you is by telling us a ton of stories about Dale Carnegie's kind of career and how he's seen over the years of teaching people how to communicate with other human beings. Stories and stories and stories of different people using different principles and why they're important, and if they make sense to you, then good. If they don't, then they don't. Every single one of them, I think, or not every single one of them for me makes perfect clarity and sense. So yeah, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Hope you guys do enjoy the rest of your day. I'm off to go film one more video with my voice almost completely gone. Love you. Bye.